today's Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by John Gucci Foley. John is the lead solo pilot and renowned Blue Angels flight team. I also believe he may well have featured in Top Gun movie, so we'll come on that. I was honored to meet John and Mark Devine, who was a Navy SEAL, at a recent leadership event at Harvard. And the lessons he took us through really blew me away. So let's get straight into the show. John, you're very, very welcome on this week's Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. Firstly, just give us a quick background to your journey so far.
Yeah, well, first off, Neil, glad to be here. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to be with you again. That Harvard experience was awesome. Thank you for sharing these kinds of insights with your other entrepreneurs, making a difference in other people's lives. So that to me is what glad to be here means. It's not a flippant statement, right? And we used it on the Blue Angels. You mentioned I was the lead solo pilot with the Blue Angels. Think Red Arrows over there in the UK, right? But more importantly, it's kind of what I did after the Blues that I think could be the most beneficial for most of the people on this call. I'm a fellow entrepreneur like everybody else on this call, right? My background, very simply, was I was born in Germany. My dad was an Army officer. He's an engineer. I love my dad, want to grow up just like him. So that's what I thought I was going to be. And then Neil, one day he took me to an air show. I'll never forget this day. I'm actually 11 years old, about to turn 12. I look up in the sky and I see these 6 magnificent blue jets flying that day. And I turned to my dad that day. I said, Dad, I'm going to do that. An 11-year-old kid. Think about that, Neil, or anybody who's listening. Where do dreams hit us? I suggest dreams hit us in the heart, not the head. And I think this is the key to entrepreneurial. Everybody who's an entrepreneur has a vision, has a dream. Hopefully there's a clarity to that dream, but you got to get beyond it just being an idea. It's got to get into the heart. And that happened to me that day. See, it was a visceral feeling. You could smell the smoke oil in the air. You could feel the crowd, the jets going overhead. And I, as a kid, went, that's what I want to do. And I was just listening to something Arnold Schwarzenegger just put out. He's got his new book out there. And it's still, be clear. What's your vision? And get super clear on that. I would add to the clarity, it has to be a feeling. Entrepreneurs know this. When you feel it in your body. Yeah, I think the key there, Neil, was I had a vision that was very clear in my mind. Now you got to come up with a strategy, a plan. Entrepreneurs know that. So my strategy was simply, hey, I got to join the military because the Blue Angels happen to be Navy. Now that, had some step goals involved, like go to college, get your grades done, that kind of stuff. But I got rejected. I got rejected 3 times for the academies. They said I wasn't physically qualified. So I had to go, through some special medical waivers. I eventually did get into the academies. And then, after that, I selected flights, which is, I knew the path. So I needed to get an assignment to flying, which I did. Then came all kinds of obstacles, flying jets off aircraft carriers, flying in the movie Top Gun, the original one. Great stuff, but lots of obstacles. And really at the end of the day, it's like any entrepreneur, right? The path didn't exactly lay out the way I expected it. There was lots of changes, I had to adapt, but eventually I became a Blue Angel, and then my life changed. So I think, with this podcast, we can go into some of the Blue Angel messaging, but I had to reinvent myself after the Blue Angels. And that's when I became an entrepreneur, went to Stanford Business School, got 3 master's degrees. And now I've had the rare privilege, like you, Neil, to work with people and organizations around the world. So over 2,000 companies, some of the best in Silicon Valley, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Intels, but also the VC firms who have small companies, who are just starting, individuals. They bring me in and I speak to all their CEOs. So a lot of lessons on how to apply those lessons in the Blue Angels.
Just listening to you there, you remind me of watching Top Gun, which has to be one of my favorite movies of all time. I was lucky enough when I was traveling around the world in '86 to see it.
Good. Where were you? Do you remember where you were?
I can tell you exactly where I was. I was in Hollywood. I was in watching it on this screen. Literally, it was like in a dome, and all the seats went back, and they showed the movie on the roof of this. I can tell you right now, I've never ever had an experience like it. The planes were coming from every way, which way in that movie theater. It was insane, and that flight instructor who said, "Gentlemen, we are looking for the best of the best." And when you just said that a few minutes ago, you're working with the best of the best, it just reminded me of that classic iconic line when you had Goose and Maverick and all of those guys who were probably weren't at the time. I thought they were the best of the best. I think they probably had a bit of an ego trip about them, didn't they? But obviously prevailed through that. So let's double back a bit around what you believe that sort of Blue Angels part of your career gave you, specifically around, obviously you were a lead solo pilot, and how did that really shape your understanding of leadership, John?
Yeah, great question. First off, I'm going to give you another tagline. So, in Top Gun 1, we're going to make you the best of the best, but here's what I like to do now is how do the best get better? See, that's what I talk about. And, and what I do is I use the analogy, kind of what you just asked there, of this experience on the Blue Angels. So it's very unique. Let me just start with that, Neil. First off, being part of the flying jets off aircraft carriers and being part of Top Gun, whether it's the movie or the actual organization, because it does exist. It's a train the trainer model. Those kinds of things were my normal day. And you see the Top Gun Maverick has been out, right? Those kind of missions I used to fly all the time. But the difference is, how do you share those experiences in a way that helps others? And that was my big transition, getting out of I did some leadership roles in the military, in the Navy. And then I said, we got to go into the real world. What does this mean to real people in the real world? I was working in Silicon Valley right around 2000, 2001. I was part of a VC firm. It was an early stage technology firm. And, the world was just exploding. You remember that time, 2000, 2001? Yeah. I mean, I'm in the hotbed, Silicon Valley. Myself and our partners are making these investments in companies that would turn out to be phenomenal. And a thought hit my head. Actually, two things happened. If you remember what happened, there was a bubble and it burst. You remember that, Neil?
I do, very much so.
Yeah. And that would, to me, this is where all this leadership came in, because, it's easy to make money when everything's going well. It's easy to be an entrepreneur when everything's going well. It's hard when real life hits you, right? And that was a moment. And I remember, my partners and I are sitting around a table and we have to make some tough decisions. It was the classic, what are we going to do? And I remember a thought hitting my head, and it's guided me ever since. It was, how come? That was the thought that hit me. But my how come question was not how come the bubble burst. See, I tried to go above and beyond that. My how come question was, how come some people can outperform others and some don't? How come some teams and organizations can consistently be the best of the best under any circumstances, whether there's the interest rates changing, whether it's supply chain, whether it's COVID? There's certain people in certain organizations that always are at the top, and most of us aren't, right? And so I started to unpack that question. I said, if I can find out that answer, then we can help a lot of people. And Neil, that's been my quest for the last 2 decades. And I shared with you some of that information at Harvard. So what stuck with you? And I'm happy to go deeper.
Yeah, that's a kind of thing. And it's really interesting. There's a book I read recently called The Captain Class. I don't know if you've come across it at all.
What's it called? The Captain Class?
The Captain Class, yeah. And it studied some of the most peak performing sports teams around the world that have left a legacy.
Oh, yeah.
And it wasn't the coach, it wasn't the owner, wasn't necessarily the team. What differentiated these long-lasting legacy teams, be it basketball, rugby, soccer, was the captain. The captain who had a unique, humble leadership style, but absolute deep professional will to prevail.
Yeah, I love that. I've read a little bit of that book, not the book, but some outtakes. I think you're right. So here's my answer to that kind of question is, I think it's a yes and, okay? And so my opinion is, does the captain matter? Absolutely. Does the CEO, does the entrepreneur, the leader matter? Absolutely. Is it enough? No. You got to have a team. You got to have process and systems. If you want to scale, you guys are scaling up, right? You better have some processes and systems. What I found, and I shared a little bit of this with you at Harvard, is there's a framework that I like to call the Diamond Performance Framework. Call it whatever you want, but it's the classic vision, plan, execute, feedback framework. Meaning, do we need a vision? Absolutely. Yeah. What's your cadence of execution? That's, to me, the brief and debrief. There's the preparation, there's the execution, and then there's the debrief, which, by the way, the weakest link in most people and organizations, they don't do that. We on the Blue Angels do it better than any other team in the world, including Top Gun. And it's why the Blue Angels can fly closer together and lower to the ground than any other team in the world, not just the Red Arrows, every team in the world. We do this with half the leadership changing every year. Half the pilots are new. A third of all my maintenance, my support team are new. We cycle them through. So I've really started to unpack not only how do you reach a level of excellence, how do you sustain excellence under change, which I think is every entrepreneur's challenge.
What do you think about feedback process in the Blue?
Yeah. Well, here's what's critical. We'll dive into it right away. I call it the glad to be here debrief. The concept of feedback, the concept of debrief is not new. Hopefully we'll learn something from this podcast that goes beyond concepts, right? So, everyone knows, well, if something goes wrong, we need to figure out what went well, what went wrong. Let's make some changes. Okay, fine. All right. That to me is not enough. That's just basic stuff. You need to do that. And if that's all you're doing, you're making a big mistake, okay? The big mistake is this. Then those after action reviews, those feedback reviews, those debriefs are only done when there's a problem, okay? And that's not what I'm talking about here. Do you need to do those? Absolutely, okay? What we're talking about, the differentiator, is that we created a process and a system. Of course, the leader mattered. So how you come across as the leader or the quote captain matters on style. But we created a process and a system that we did it all the time. And we actually turned it into a leadership building activity, where we built chemistry, camaraderie. Here's the biggest thing. We built trust, high trust. And that's what allowed us to execute at the highest levels.
Yeah, I would imagine trust is paramount when you're flying about 6 foot from one another. You trust.
Oh, 6 feet? Come on, that's 2 meters over in your world. That's nothing. Okay. No, man, we start at 36 inches. We start at 1 meter, and then we get closer. We get down to 12 inches. So don't give me this 6 feet crap.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Okay. I get it. Trust. And I think, it's one of those things that certainly entrepreneurs can learn so much from. I think the Navy SEALs called log of lessons learned, the debrief of just taking the time out from a particular campaign or a strategy to really contemplate what went well, what didn't go so well, what can we do differently next time.
Well, you brought up the SEALs, and Mark's a buddy of mine, and I got lots of SEALs friends. They do it really well too. They do it slightly different also, and that's okay. See, I want all entrepreneurs to understand you need to adapt this to your world and what's going on, right? But the difference is the SEALs, the Blue Angels, we have this as part of the DNA of our operational cadence. So you're not adding an extra meeting. You're not creating another drain on people. It's just the opposite. Is we would never do something and not prepare, brief, and most companies do a really good job at this, right? You spend a lot of time, market analysis, strategy, and yet you've spent very little time learning and adapting to the changes which are happening every day. So if you're not debriefing all the time, you're missing those opportunities. And more importantly, you're probably gonna end up having a big problem down the road because you didn't identify it. But I think the bigger thing is you're missing the opportunity to build trust and teamwork and chemistry and camaraderie. The glad to be here is significant, Neil. It's not just the debrief, okay? You got to create a glad to be here experience within the debrief. And there's 5 dynamics that I have found working with 2,000 companies in 20 years that are the overarching 5 dynamics that allow any entrepreneur to scale this.
So what are those dynamics, John?
That's what if you're going to ask. Yeah, I teed it up. All right. Yeah, that's a softball question. You just hit it out of the park there, Neil. Good job. Yeah. So first thing is I call a safe environment. All right. And what I mean by a safe environment, this is not just a physically safe environment. We all learned that through COVID. I'm talking about a psychologically safe environment. I'm talking about an environment that has respect. And that's the key. Right? The way you get a safe environment is it has to start with respect. That's why the captain matters. The CEO matters. You have to have everybody be respected and respectful. It's a two-way street, right? So that's number one. Okay. Number 2 is you got to check your ego at the door. You know, you mentioned this idea of egos, right? Well, we didn't have egos on the Blue Angels. Did we have them? Yeah, but you didn't see them. And I'll tell you why, because we had, as part of our onboard process, part of our hiring process, something that we did every single day is we actually focused on humility. See, we looked for leaders and people who were humble. Why? Because of course I can find your skills. Of course you're good at what you do. You should be confident. But the more important than being confident is being humble. And humble's not weak, by the way. Humble's not soft, by the way. You've seen this probably in great leaders. When you find anybody who's excelled at whatever they do, I don't care if it's business, I don't care if it's sports, I don't care if it's flying. If they have excelled and they are the best of the best, they're usually some of the most humble people around. Okay. And so we look for that. They're vulnerable, they're transparent, and they're willing to learn. And that's my new mantra: learn, grow, give. Neil, learn, grow, give.
Well, I think again at Harvard,
that's the first 2.
Yeah, just to check in on that point you made there. I think Carol Dweck talks an awful lot about the growth mindset, and I think we had her protege also speak at Harvard as well. So, how do you sort of both identify folk who have got the growth mindset, but also you have got that humility? What sort of process did you go through selection and onboarding, John?
Yeah, so here's what's huge. All right. One is we did what every organization and every HR team will tell you to do. Yeah. You know, we got letters of recommendation, referrals from people. We had the applicants fill out, you know, a letter. Why do they want to be there? So we did the basic, you know, what's your resume? That was fine. Okay. I'm saying, yes, you need to do that stuff. That's not how we made decisions. All right. And I've learned this in the civilian world too. You know, there's lots of great resumes. There's lots of people who can come across as being really good at what they do. But I need to know that your purpose is higher than self. So that's the key. Okay. I want to know your purpose. Hopefully that purpose, hopefully it has to align with the purpose of the organization. Okay. So alignment matters. Yes. Okay. But it needs to be larger than self. If someone is just in it for themselves, I don't want you on my team. You may be really good. Okay. But I don't want you, because at some point you're going to become a cancer. And I've seen it, right? So this purpose higher than self is absolutely critical. The question that if I were you or if I'm listening that you want to ask me is, well, okay, great. How do you find that? You know, how do you find out that's what someone's purpose is and if it's larger than self? So what do you do, Neil? And then I'll tell you what we do.
What to find from my clients where their purpose is?
Yeah. How do you find out if somebody has a purpose and if it's larger than self?
Yeah, because it's interesting. It's a really good point. I mean, and that's the thing that actually one of the things I love doing. And we just actually use the question why a lot, bizarrely. Because once you kind of just start to, why do you do that? Why is that important to you? Why? Yeah. Why? And I think I think it was Jim Collins, something like that. That's almost like the 5 whys you keep asking until you start to settle on what their real purpose is. And that's really exciting when you can see they're almost the hairs in the back of the neck stand up, and they kind of almost help them discover. Because I don't think everybody, John's always got clarity on exactly what their purpose is.
Yes.
I don't know if you would agree on that.
Well, no, most of us don't, be honest with you. Yeah. And to a certain level, right? Here, I asked a question. I love the 5 whys. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
There's also the hows. Like when you get to the how, well, how am I going to do that? Okay, fine. Well, how are you going to do that? Fine. You go through the same concentric circle, right?
Yes.
But let's stay with the why, because I think that's super critical. Here's a question I use all the time on my coaching and when I work with people and organizations. I have them come up with their I am statement. Okay. I want to know how you answer the question, I am blank. All right, that's it. I am blank. And that's a starting point. So how would you answer that question, Neil? And then I'll answer mine if you want. But how do you define your own personal I am statement? I am blank. Go.
I am helping ambitious entrepreneurs successfully scale up their company and achieving the maximum valuation for their organization.
Nice. See, you thought of it. That was obvious. It came right. It came out of you. It's like a mission statement, but it's clear, right? Now, why are you here?
Because it's important stuff to help people achieve their dreams and achieve their goals. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle, and it shouldn't be that way. That if you've got the right people around you who can really help you be your best and achieve whatever you need to do, then they can live their fulfilled lives.
And why is that important to you?
Wow. Great coaching question now. I think it's just helping leave a legacy of the number of folk that you've actually helped in your life. And if I've helped people achieve their dreams, then that's very fulfilling from my perspective.
Yeah, there you go. So thanks, buddy. I mean, we're having fun, right? You just did two. We just did 2 whys, right? So you got 3 more to do. I'll do those some other day. But the other idea here is now I learned something about you. All right, that was very telling. Very quickly, that you truly care about others. You don't think it ought to be too painful to be an entrepreneur, and you want to help people scale and reach their dreams. Why? Because it's fulfilling to you. Right? It's a legacy for you. So to me, see, that's what we do. That's what I when I'm interviewing people, and that's not enough just to have a quick interview. Now we got to go hang out. We were at Harvard together. We spent a little bit of time. So now I need to know, how you respond to challenges. And so when we interview people, we spend time together with them in a non-work environment, right? As best we can. So, again, you got to ask yourself, are you willing to put in the time to find the right person, right? And most of us, honestly, we wait too long. Now you got a need and you're just trying to fill that need with somebody. That's not what we do on the Blues. It's not what I do on my company. You really got to think ahead, and you got to get the right person first. And then you get them in the right seat, of course. So the why question is huge. The I am question is huge. And we look for that. And that to me is way more important than your skills. I get the skills. Okay. That's a given. So that's it. We focus on that stuff.
Recruit for attitude, train for aptitude.
Nice.
Very, very good. Now, so we've gone through safe environment. We put our egos at the door. What are the other elements of the Diamond Performance Framework?
Yeah, well, actually, this is the 5 dynamics within the Diamond Performance Framework. So I'll get you the last 3 of the dynamics, and that is you got to lay it on the table. Okay, that's number 3. This is open and honest communication. This is transparency. What do we typically see out there? Pretty much the opposite. You see people who are just willing to share enough, right? There's tons of withholds in organizations and people. Why? Because they're fear. It's all about fear. They're afraid. They're afraid they're going to get fired. They're afraid that they're not going to look as good as they say they are. They're afraid they're an imposter. There's all this fear out there, right? So we got to break down the fear. And the way we do that is we lay it on the table. We have a debrief that's open and honest. And it doesn't mean it's not contentious sometimes. Doesn't mean that it's not hard. But it's done with the we, not the I mentality. And that allows you to get over your own issues and challenges. And it starts with an inward look. Before you start pointing a finger at somebody else, you got to point it at yourself.
That's great. And I think because you've created a safe environment, then obviously you can be absolutely open with one another. I think it was Patrick Lencioni in the Five Dysfunctions of Team, which basically
very
said,
similar.
the only way that you can really build an aligned team is by having this utter trust with one another, so that you can have the what did he call it? Sort of the conflict, not beating each other up in terms of physical conflict, but they're fighting for the right outcomes.
Yeah. And here's the key. Patrick and I, by the way, we speak at a lot of events together.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right. The key is I just want the best answer. I don't care whose it is, right? So again, this is about the we, not the I. When you truly have that, it allows you to level the playing field too, which is important to have a safe environment and to lay it on the table. Rank doesn't matter as far as ideas, but experience is important. I'm going to give some more consideration to someone who's been there and done it, right, than just an idea person. So my point is that we got to have those meetings. Then they again happen in the debrief. That's the Glad to Be Here debrief. The fourth one is accountability. Okay, so we can have those first three, but if you don't have accountability, it ain't going to happen. And I think the key on accountability is what I call own it and fix it mentality. So I want my team to own the outcome, not just their role. That's a big difference. Okay. What do we typically say? Well, do your job. Of course you got to do your job. There's sales, there's marketing, there's ops, there's all these people. And what do? They point the finger at somebody else. And they say, well, the reason this didn't happen was because of supply chain. Crap. That's not going to work in my company. Okay. Yeah. You got to own the outcome. So if you're not supply, but that's a challenge, help them. Let's figure this out together, right? And to me, that's taking personal responsibility. That's the word I want to leave you with. It's 2 words. Yeah. Is I want personal responsibility. Therefore, accountability becomes a given. And so that's what we focus on. We focus on people taking personal responsibility and owning the outcome.
Beautiful. And then the fifth one?
Fifth one is most important. Okay. So hopefully, hopefully if you're listening to this, you're going, holy shit. Yeah, this does make sense. And by the way, they do all need to be there, and sometimes there's gaps and stuff. But the fifth one is what is unique and it allows you to scale. And that is the glad to be here. So my fifth dynamic is a glad to be here mindset that is based on gratitude and appreciation. The science is so overwhelming now that shows why a glad to be here mindset, why the gratitude in the workplace, in your own life, why is it so important? I mean, the science is blowing it out the charts here, but that's something I knew from day one. And that's what makes it unique. When you can add the first 4, to me, fall into the operational excellence kind of mentality. But the fifth one is this mentality on greatness and gratitude. And when you add that in, now you have something very special that really the best of the best know. And all the rest of us are seeking it.
I saw it firsthand, again, the talk you gave, the way you just begun everything with this enormous attitude of gratitude, just about being there. And I think, John, I was just blown away by that whole area where we were grateful to have you. And you're kind of grateful to be on stage around that. What sort of other examples can you give of where you've used gratitude, maybe with some of your colleagues, team members, that people could just sort of bring it to life a bit?
Well, it's the way we check in. So part of my debrief is there's a framework within the framework, of course, right? Yeah. So, how do we check in? We check in with a feeling statement, and I check in with appreciation for somebody else. Yeah. So that's sharing gratitude in a public way, right? And now sometimes your feeling statement could be everything but that. You could be like, I'm pissed off. We're late on this deliverable. I don't feel good about this client engagement. I mean, you got to tell your true feelings, right? Yeah. And you can still be grateful. Hey, we're grateful even to have the opportunity, whatever, right? So my point is that that's how I use it business-wise. Personally, I do what I call my glad to be or wake up every morning. I wake up, I do 3 things. What am I grateful for in the present moment? What happened yesterday I was grateful for? And what am I going to do intention this today to be grateful for. By the way, I'm doing this in bed, right? I just trained my brain to want to wake up happy. And that's how I do it, right? So today was easy. I happen to be in Sun Valley, Idaho. So that's a ski area in the US, right? And that's where I live. And I'm on the road 200 days speaking to clients and stuff like that. But when I'm home, I'm home. I'm like, wow, this is really grateful. Yesterday I just went on a hike with my doggies. We went up to 9,000 feet, 3,000 meters, and there's snow, serious amount of snow. But we're in the wilderness, so there's no one around. We're going through creeks that are half iced, half not. You don't want to fall through. I actually did a little bit, got my whole foot wet. Luckily, it wasn't too deep. But I like those kind of challenges. I mean, if I had hit my head, you'd die, but that's okay. I don't mind that. And then the idea of, and the dogs are great. I got 2 Rhodesian Ridgebacks. They're eating this shit up, man. They're looking for elk. They're looking for moose. They're sniffing stuff. I mean, it's just freaking cool. But anyhow, I just reminded myself of that. And then I got forward in my day and said, hey, I get the rare privilege. Neil and I are going to have a conversation later on in the day. I hope it goes well. How can I help him? Not about me. How can I help you? So that's what I did. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think most of the meetings I work with clients, we always start with good news and check in.
Nice.
And it's just a ritual almost, but it just kind of gets the negative crap out of the way. That most of us come in to any kind of situation with. Negatives in the front of our brain. And
give me an example. You say you check in with good news. So how does some of those go?
Oh, well, look, today I'm just grateful or good news that we landed this deal, or that we were able to get this great hire over the line, or that we've done some good stuff. So you kind of, and we do it both, interestingly, John, both personal good news and business good news.
Yes.
Typically. So it could be you said, look, I just went on an amazing walk yesterday, or my wife, who has been very well, she's feeling a lot better today. Oh, great. I didn't. And then basically, if you've got a senior team, not just connecting on the business level, but you've also got to feel for each other about what's going on outside of the business. And that builds a best camaraderie, teamship, all the trust that you were talking about earlier on. So, and I think the other thing is this whole notion now that people crave for recognition. And when I saw a speaker just probably a year ago, and he said one thing that we should all be doing is just taking time out in our busy schedules just to thank people. Just drop them a handwritten note, just saying thank you so much for busting a gut to get this project over the line. Thank you so much for investing in that time to help somebody out who's struggling. Handwritten note, just appreciation and showing that attitude of gratitude. Recognize people, I think, and especially more since we've had a pandemic, John, that people really appreciate that.
I'm with you, man, 100%. Yeah. What's unique is, I go back to the yes and comment, because I agree. Gratitude is so important. I'll tell you what's unique about the Blues, though, is when we debrief, we start with the general feeling statement. And that's, most people say, no, I want the facts. I want the facts. We'll get to the facts. Don't worry about that. I want to know how you think. But instead of going right to the goods, unless that happens to be part of your general feeling statement, which you can do, right? We actually go to what were you out of parameters on anything? We call it a safety. Right. And we get it on the table right away. But no one's pointing this out to you. You're pointing it out to your teammates that, hey, I was off here. I was 30 feet low. If that's out of parameters, you say it. And then you say, I'll fix it. Glad to be here. And you move on. Right. So what you're doing is a combination. I think that when I teach the glad to be here debrief, I'm teaching you need to do both. It's not enough just to be touchy feely. Hey, here's all the good stuff. I agree with you. You got to have the good stuff. But I also want to get on the table anything. It's the elephants in the room, right? Yes, most of the time people know it. They already know that it didn't go great. And maybe if you were the technology person and technology crapped out, well, then you better have an answer, right? Or not, you don't have to have an answer. You just better own up to it, right? And then we'll figure out the answer together. So it's a very unique way of doing it. And I got to tell you, it can be challenging because some people, they're not used to being that open and honest. And so the leader has to set the tone first.
Yeah. Just like the conductor of the orchestra, setting the tone.
That's it. Well said. Well said.
Yeah, you got it. Final few questions, John. Firstly, what does high performance mean to you?
Well, high performance means being the seeking continuous improvement. Okay. I don't see it as a result. I see it as a process, right? So if I'm in the high performance zone, remember I talked about that, right?
Yeah.
The high performance zone to me is simply the gap between where you are and where you want to go. So, as a coach, you got to define where are you trying to go? That's way more important. Lots of KPIs on where are you. That's usually not hard, right? But there's a gap between where you are and where you're trying to go. So to me, that's the high performance zone. So when I'm in that gap, I'm trying to get better. It's the growth mindset that Carol likes to talk about. Okay. But it's to me that that's where the performance framework that I've been talking about comes in. And I start with vision, then I brief, that's preparation. I execute through high trust contracts. I debrief with a glad to be here mindset. All of this is around a center point. So I got to have alignment, and 3 things happen. You connect, you align, you commit every single day. And when that happens, you get a spiraling up process that closes those gaps faster than anything else. Proven.
Love it. Connect, align, and commit.
Yep.
Right. From a personal point of view, how do you continue to stay on top of your game?
Oh man, I'm just constantly learning. So learn, grow, give, right? So, the reason I was super excited about being at Harvard is I'm learning too, right? I'm learning from all the other people and all the other things. But learning's not enough. Okay. So all of us listening to this, that's great. You have a thirst to get better, you got to apply it. That to me is growth, right? So I can hear all these things I want, but I better just apply something, try it, right? And guess what? If it doesn't work, that's good information. I want the informations where I'm having struggles, right? So it's the learn, grow, but here's the last one, give, all right? And I finally realized I got the order wrong. It really starts with giving, right? So that's what I'm doing here for you. I got no agenda out of this, right? Can I give in a way that helps you, that helps others? Then I'll remember that tomorrow morning. I'll wake up and I'll go, hey, I enjoyed that podcast. I was giving. And that's the key to all entrepreneurs. Find someone who's struggling or trying to do the same thing you are and help them. Give. That's why you being a coach is so important and meaningful.
Thank you so much. And give is gain ultimately. So it's beautiful. If you had your time over again, what is the one bit of advice you'd give yourself, the young 21-year-old John? Well,
it would be fearless. And I actually was pretty fearless back then, but not completely. We all got, layers in us. And don't be afraid to have setbacks. In fact, I had a ton of them. Reach to the sky. Reach for those big dreams, right? So, as a 21-year-old, I played football in the U.S., at a pretty high level. It was college level, wasn't pro, but at a very high level. And I was small and should never have been on the pitch. You guys like to call it a pitch. We call it a field, right? But I didn't let those things limit me. And it was fun as hell. And I'm grateful for those experiences. But I didn't waddle in the past. Then it's the next thing is, what's the next area? Flying. Okay, well, flying's cool, but flying jets is even cooler. Flying tactical jets is cool. Flying tactical jets off aircraft carriers is freaking crazy. And then being with the Blue Angels. And guess what? That's where I set my goals. And, we happen to hit it, right? And now you're reinventing the self within the business world, right? It's just a constant state of reinvent yourself and be fearless. That's what I'd say.
Be fearless. Final question, John. What book are you reading at the moment?
I'm not reading it yet, but I'm intrigued with Arnold Schwarzenegger's new book. I don't even know the title, but I've been seeing a lot of, some audio stuff on it. And I'm really impressed with him because he did exactly what we just said. This guy's reinvented himself multiple times, right? Coming from Austria, going to the US, becoming the Mr. Universe. Then, that wasn't enough. Became a movie actor and then that wasn't enough. He became governor of California. It's a big deal, right? That wasn't enough. Now he's reinventing himself for the fourth time. And I think this is even the more important one. He's actually sharing the experiences he had, both good and bad, in a way to help others. That's what I'm trying to do, right? So that's what I'm interested in. I'll listen to his book.
Yeah, we'll find it out. We'll put it on the show notes at the end of it. So, John Gucci Foley, thank you so much for joining us on this week's show. It's been absolutely brilliant. Your energy that you brought to the session has been massively inspiring. There's so many massive lessons and learnings and high performance and the glad to be here mindset and all the framework. It's just absolute wealth of energy and insights that I'm sure is going to benefit our listeners massively. So once again, thank you so much.
All right, Neil, glad to be here, brother. Keep that in your repertoire. Glad to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Entrepreneurs at Scale podcast. If you'd be kind enough to leave a review, it would really help other like-minded entrepreneurs find the podcast and grow our community. Click on the subscribe button to be kept in the loop for all future podcasts, and go to the show notes for additional reading resources and links to our guest. Until next time, thank you so much.